Hiya! Today I would like to continue our look into the live jamming rig with developments that have occurred over a month of messing around, playing around, trying different things and experimenting. Anyway, let's look at what's changed. Probably the biggest and most significant thing that happened in this month was I took delivery of a noise engineering Basimilus Iteritas Alta. I am following the lead of Alex, wonderful Alex from Rubberdub, who said, just fucking get one, right? And he's right. You should just fucking buy one. Because I basically got it and was like, this is cool. Oh my God, this makes wicked percussion sounds. And then I started doing what Alex said to do, which was feed it gate patterns. So feed it just on and off patterns, rhythmic patterns, just, not envelopes necessarily, although that would be awesome if you have them spare, but just literally on and off gates. Just feed it into the inputs for the controls. And what happens is the Basimilus Iteritas Alta becomes a complete... You could literally play a show with just that and a shit ton of modulation. This is fucking ridiculous. I'm serious. Like, it might be a very proto-techno show, but that would be awesome. But you could do it. Like, I have no doubt. And I know that Steve from Noise Engineering and Chris, they play shows just using Basimilus Iteritas Altas under modulation, and I fully believe them because it is unbelievable. We'll look at it in a sec, but oh my God, because it gives you, especially if you're doing sort of techno-y things, it gives you so much more than percussion. It's like an entire blend of drum and bass. It is the ultimate hybrid of those things. And if you modulate it, it can be a bass drum, it can be a snare drum, it can be a hi-hat, it can be a weird gronky spanging sound, it can do a billion things in between, wave folding, sounds like chords. Sometimes it sounds like a person speaking. It just does all manner of different things, and it can just one frigging tiny module that does it. So I think you can tell that I might be a little bit blown away by this, and that's because I am a little bit blown away by this. One of the biggest changes is that we've lost Maths and Atlantis. We haven't lost them. I love them dearly. They're not going anywhere. But what I am trying to see is if I can squeeze more voices into a smaller space by using the Chorgasmatron and other modules, which I'm not able to talk about fully just yet. I'm hoping that I can try and squeeze more into a small space, because space is an unbelievable premium, and I freaking love the Atlantis more than life itself. But I am trying to squish more in. You'll see that I've got one of these Copper Traces Seek sequencer, and I'm going to do a proper demo video of the Seek sequencer. It's really interesting, and the Seek sequencer has got kind of algorithmic aspects that you can, literally push a button and it will start generating sequences for you, which is awesome. The other point you'll see is that I've got pressure points in the case. And I was really keen to try and put pressure points in. I really love using pressure points as a way of creating transposing, so that you could push a button and push a button and push a button. And by blending that voltage with other voltages from sequences, you could transpose a sequence. And I've got the intuitive quantizer, which allows me to quantize 4 things at once. So I'm interested to experiment with that, but that's not how I've got it set up at the moment. This grids is a big change, because this isn't the same grids that you saw last month. This one is mine. I bought a grids along with a branches. And I did this because I was conscious that the sequential switch just feels a bit limiting in terms of its ability to switch between sources. Originally, I was using the sequential switch to change between closed hi-hats and open hi-hats. And whilst that's kind of a novel implementation, in practice, I found it relatively limiting. And because I was using the rotating clock divider, in part to choose when the switch was happening, it just was then happening very regularly. And so I could have obviously put random voltages into the rotate input, but I don't know. I'm just trying to keep things simple. And I was really interested to try branches, because what branches is doing is like a coin toss. So I have my pattern here as we did last month, but if I turn this, it's a coin toss. So it has 1 input and 2 outputs. And then, depending on where the knob is set, sets the likelihood that the coin toss will emerge out of one side would mean that it sends its gate out of one side or the other. Does that make sense? So if I have it all the way over this side, I'm just hearing closed hi-hats. If I have it all the way over this side, I'm just hearing open hi-hats. And if I have it somewhere in the middle, the little coins get tossed, and then every now and then it's closed, and every now and then it's open. And somehow, to me, that just seems that little bit more interesting and machine-led than the sequential switch, which would be doing it on a regular flip, depending on the clock divider. Again, I could rotate the clock divider, which would have the effect of jumbling things up, but this is just easier, and it's then very quick to just go straight back to that, just closed hi-hats, or just open. Another thing that I've wired up, that midway through a set, I can do this. And change hat style. So as the evening wears on and folks get into more of a techno mindset, you can deliver more techno hats. Or of course you can have a little bit of both. And the Hats 909 is fun just because it's that little bit more flexible. Like, you can modulate Hats 909, you can modulate the pitch and stuff. It's just kind of cool. You can do this as well. But then we can flip between the two. So I'm just conscious, I wanted to give myself a place to go in terms of hats. I freaking love the 808, but the 909 gives you another flavor. Now, another thing that's changed is I have a clouds in here. The clouds I put in because the clouds is just the ultimate companion to radio music. And what's nice about the clouds is I can just feed random stuff in from the radio music as like a source. And I've also got an abstract data octo controller in here to experiment with modulation, and that's because of the Basimilus Iteritas alter. I've put that in partly as a source to modulate that, and what I'm intending to do is have the switches so that I can flip between the gate patterns that we talked about and maybe LFOs and things on one side. We're not quite there yet. But the clouds, I mean, you know about clouds, right? But it's a source of textures. It can create pads and things like this, weird sounds, and what's really nice is that it's got its own reverb built in, which I sincerely appreciate in a small system like this, because then you've just got a bit of verb just on that element, and then you can blend in like that. Oh, nice. It's just like a source of uncertainty, but the nice thing here is that with clouds, if you feed it a trigger into the trigger input, like we're doing here, you can fire it off. So it's just like, it's a brilliant source for that like extra sound. You see here? And I'm modulating the position using the octo controller. So it's just a brilliant pairing. I mean, you can obviously reset a radio music and chop it up using a VCA and things like this, but clouds just obviously gives you so much more flexibility. You can do weird things like turn that element, keep it as a choppy bit, you can blend in a bit of the original sound, you can add reverb, and more importantly, you can pitch it up and down, so it's very easy to make something that fits better with the rest of a set. So it's just a kind of obvious, I know, but it's an obvious pairing that I didn't do, and I don't think it will be leaving the case after I've done it. The other thing that I've done is I have put in a Mutant bass drum. Because at Super Booth, I was hanging out with my friend Gur from Tip Top Audio, and Gur had the 909 and 808 bass drum mixed together, and my God, it sounds great. I mean, we all know that, right? But it reminded me that it does. So I've taken out the Mutant snare, and I've put in the Mutant bass drum. Just to also give myself extensibility, if that is the correct term, that midway through a set you'll be able to bring in a different kick flavor, and it's more adaptable than the BD808. It can also sort of act like a tom. Although I will have to think carefully about whether I, feed it from the switch multiple to be able to feed it different gate patterns. Yeah. But again, the biggest change is this Basimilus Iteritas altar, and I think we should just have a quick play just so I can give you a sense of what I'm coming from, where I'm coming from with that Bad Mother Hubbard. So the altar is ostensibly a percussion sequencer, or percussion module. You feed it a little hit. And depending on the position of the dials, it will give you different stuff. Depending on the mode, there are 3 modes: skin, liquid, and metal, and there are different pitch ranges: bass, alto, and treble. But it just absolutely excels at like being the backbone to a kind of techno thing. You can shorten it. The attack knob's nice because if you have it right in the top, it just starts with a percussive, starts sharp. You can push it to the right and it will start softer. But if you push it to the left, it'll add in noise, so it becomes like a snare. And I'm using the grid to program it. But then I also have the ability to program it from circadian rhythms, which I can switch in and out. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is the best percussion module that I have ever played within Eurorack, without a shadow of a doubt, because it does the most. It can go from little metallic hatsy things to a whole load of different positions, and to sort of bass drum territory, although as you can see I'm still learning it, but ooh. It's just like this. I mean, you can just push it around. But as I was saying, what Alex so astutely pointed out is that if you feed it gate patterns, and you see here I've got the bottom 3 rows of the circadian rhythms fed into it. Then, when you modulate it, it becomes enough to be almost everything. Obviously, add in other things. Is it a bass or is it a drum? It just like constantly surprises you. I'm just like, because there's so much interaction. As you mess around with it, introduce other elements, just like, holy shit, now it's making a completely different sound. mean, just that stuff is it's catnip to me at the moment. It's just too damn cool for school. Because, I mean, you come to the realization that you can almost just play with just the percussion sequencing on its own, but it wouldn't be Mylar melodies if I didn't have any melodies. And then, to be brutally honest, that's an element that I've almost been leaving till last. So it will remain to be seen how that will work out. Hopefully well, fingers crossed, right? But yes. It's amazing how well it works. So I'm just interested to feed this more. I have just taken delivery of Pamela's new workout, and the PEXP one, which will provide not only gate patterns but also voltage sources. And I'm really interested to pair that with the BIA, because then I think you can just modulate the crap out of it even more. The other thing is that I've got two pip slopes, which I foresee going in these slots, because as I've lost maths, sad as I am, I have also lost the ability. I've lost my frigging envelopes, and I really need envelopes. Pip slopes are awesome because these are little looping envelopes I can feed, and they're quite hands-on-y. There's more control than other compact envelope generators. You can actually get your fingers around these, and you can modulate the attack and decay times. And also, I've got this, the PE1, which is a little parametric EQ, which I think will be very interesting, perhaps paired with clouds, just to like tame things somewhat. Yeah. With the melodic aspect, what I've kind of wired up at the moment is a slightly weird approach to firing off my voices. I've got the grids, bass drum here, if I hit play. So the bass drum channel of the grids is operating the gate that allows the Dixie through its mixer and this to be heard. But the thing that's actually pitching it is the pressure points, this top channel of pressure points going through the intuitive quantizer. And it's only advancing at the moment when it gets a 7th flash from the rotating clock divider. So I'm able to do these kind of like longer, funkier sequences where grids with its library of rhythms is actually firing off the gate, but it's not advancing every time grids plays. It's only advancing every time the rotating clock divider tells it to advance. So you end up with these longer sequences. Do you see? And then if I just give it a bass drum. Ooh. So you can do these longer sequences. Pare it down. And then I've got it going through the Korgasmatron. But yeah, I sorely need my envelopes back, so the pip slopes are going to have to go in. The logistical problem for you kids is that currently behind all of this panel there are no free ribbon slots, because I am using one 4MS row power which is working very hard on both of these rows. This is basically exactly what you shouldn't do, but I'm probably just going to daisy chain another few off of it. But I like this. I like being able to have longer sequences, so it's not just one thing going quickly. However, if I do this, now it is advancing every time the grids plays. So I can do some acid. And then I've got the Octo controller supplying modulation to pulse width modulation to keep Nick Bat happy. That sounds great. And then I've got delay from the disting. Happy days, mate. And I can sort of turn it down less. And then obviously you can change the map, should change the rhythm. And then flip back. So, I mean, it's crying out for another voice, and I'm going to incorporate the seek and other things when I can fit them in. We'll talk about that in a sec. There's two other things that I've kind of come to realise. One was messing around with James Carruthers, aka Nobot's sequential switch, where I mentioned last month that he's got his split into 2 sets of 5. And I'm really enjoying the fact that you effectively end up with 4 kind of buses, one on one side, one on the other side, and at the bottom, one on one side and one on the other side. And I actually have cut my switch multiple in half. And in fact, I am very much considering cutting this one in half. Literally, by snipping these points, I make them 2 sets of 4. I'm also curious about the idea of just snipping off the top so I can use it as a bass drum mute, you know, an overall bass drum mute and things like this. But I'm conscious not to sort of like completely knacker these things, break them. And when I then realized, oh shit, actually it was something that was really interesting that was happening before. It was completely by accident that I had the rotating clock divider firing off on some hats. Like this. I was getting unexpected interactions between the top and bottom row. And it was actually really interesting. The scary thing was I didn't quite know why it was happening for a while, and then I have to retrace all of the steps. And I came to realize that what you really want to do is you want to label these. The problem is if I'm going to put a pip slope there, I lose the ability to stick a slot, you know, a bit of masking tape. But that is really important. And I mean, it's something I see Stevio has done in his cases. He actually has blanking plates on the side because it's a thing we don't ever talk about, but ergonomics are a huge issue. And good God, they're very important if you're playing live. So I don't quite know what to do there. One suggestion from James Carruthers of Nobots, which was very smart, was getting little coloured end caps so you could push them on, and then it would give you a colour coding sense, a little bit like on the Odyssey. You know, you would know kind of what was what, and that's totally fair enough. It actually isn't a bad idea, but I still, you know, as you can see, I've started labelling the circadian rhythms. You kind of need to. As soon as you get this kind of complex interaction thing happening, you're like, I don't know why that's happening. What's that sequential switch wired up to? And it can be fun to a point, but there is a point during a set when you just need to dial it back, or you need to stop something happening. So it's super important that you know where everything is. I mean, I know that sounds obvious, but we lack labeling for things like this. You know, it's all well and good setting it up, but you have to remember exactly where it all is. And when you're developing it, you're changing things. And just this month, I pulled this apart a number of times and rewired it to try different things. But this is it. I've actually got shows coming up. We're doing an ambient thing with the band that I'm playing with, the Early Years, and that's at the Social in London, and will be a completely ambient thing. I'm probably going to bring this case because it just doesn't make sense to pull it apart. Bring it and set it up and just do simple elements blended in. There'll be the guys from Zam Duo, Matthew with his modular, Chris on saxophone, Roger on guitar, Dave singing as well. It should be actually pretty awesome. Phil, who's the drummer, will not be playing the drums, but will be playing drum machines. Phil's got a Trigger Riot. And this kind of reminds me to just mention one other thing, which is the next step for this, because I'll play the show next week with this, I think. But I've recognised, especially after Superbooth, the kind of one thing that I would dearly love to have is more just a different way of creating patterns. The circadian rhythms is wicked because it gives you absolutely specific ones. I mean, with the circadian rhythms, you can actually create randomness because you can have a little pattern and you hold random chaos and the channel. And again, and again. So in this way, you can quickly have it throw randomness into a pattern. But yet I'm still missing the kind of, I don't know, basically, well, I know what I'm missing. I'm missing the trigger riot, which is if I have the trigger riot here and using that, perhaps even in lieu of grids in some instances, that the trigger riot will be the perfect thing to, fire the Basimilus and fire, modulate it too, and make other things happen, give me other hat patterns and things like that, because the wealth of interaction that happens with the trigger riot, and I mean, I'll link to my future music video I did about it, so if you're not aware of the trigger riot, you should be. But at Superbooth, Gur has the circadian rhythms right next to the trigger riot. He says, for him, that gives him the best of both worlds. You can program a specific pattern, but the trigger riot is so damn good at just providing just ever-evolving little, other rhythmic patterns that are kind of polyrhythmic, off the beat, on the beat. And with the trigger riot, which is something you unfortunately cannot do with circadian rhythms, the trigger riot has got probability, so that you can use probabilistic aspects, and you could have a little sort of trigger pattern that's firing the Basimilus and creating, one element, and it could also be firing the clouds and having this other little human element going on, and you can have probability on those things so that there's an 80% chance that will happen or that will happen. And I can't do that with circadian rhythms, and I can't do it with switching unless I just do it all by hand. And you might remember from last month, my biggest thing is I do want the machine to sort of help me out in a way. I design a system that I set the rules, but the machine can act on those rules a little bit and give me something back so that I can focus on being minor melodies and actually making melodic aspects when, the whole rhythm, creating complex rhythms is a complex business in many ways. So I see that as the next stage. But as you can tell, where the hell's the trigger riot going to go? Going to have to lose a lot of stuff if I'm going to fit that in. And I have answered that question. The way that I'm going to fit the trigger riot in and try it out is the way that all modular people find. And that's, instead of removing some things, I've bought a new case. So this is a Lemon Design case, which actually, interestingly, if you went to Superbooth, you will have seen this case because it was on Ross's stand and I admired it greatly. And later, Ross has hooked me up with a deal, so I have acquired it. It's really cool. It's just a 104 HP case, and it's his DIY case. You would normally buy this, and it's like IKEA. It comes in pieces, and you glue and hammer it together. But he has actually built this one, and you see the colour is from the fact that he stained it. So he stained the wood. And he just did a beautiful job. I really like the stain that he used. I think it looks awesome. It looks beautiful. It kind of doesn't look like a DIY case in many ways. And I'm going to replace this Moog 104 HP rack because I'm using that rack with the early years with the Atlantis and with stepper acid in it. And I think probably also I'm going to put the IntelliGel planar so I can be like the dude from Hawkwind and a VCS3. It will be like my little VCS3. So that is it. Next step is going to be expand the case, and that will give me the option of having some other elements. I really want to get hold of Akemi's Taiko after playing with that at Superbooth. Holy goddamn shit. Similar to the Basimilus, I think a Basimilus and the Akemi's Taiko are like buddies. And they want to hang out together and play. And it could be that one other element that I think will give us enough to play with. And then I've got definitely room to have things like pip slopes and hopefully room to just mark things and actually have some, nod to usability in this whole system. And the other thing is when you see people like, Colin Benders, who's ace, Colin's playing with quite big systems. With that said, though, I'd like to point something out, which was that at Superbooth recently, I rocked up to the Dopfer stand and I saw this big flopsy-haired dude, looks like Sideshow Bob, playing on a Dopfer system. And it was Colin. And realizing what he was playing with as well, all he had was a bass drum that he'd made out of a sine wave and a VCA and an envelope generator. He had the Dopfer sampler, the A112, and he was just sort of scrubbing through a sample, and he put that through a VCA with an envelope as well. So he was kind of going chop, 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 chop. Exactly. It's no coincidence. This is why I've started doing this with clouds, because I saw him doing that. Then he had a A155, just doing a little sort of acid sequence going through with just one of the dope for VCOs going through the WASP filter. So it was a bubbly kind of synth line off of a standard step sequencer, a vocal element, and a bass drum. That was all he was playing with. And I just stood there, and it just was the funkiest, coolest sounding thing that I'd heard all day. And it just says that, I've got a lot of things in here, but you don't need many elements. You can get away with just a bass drum, one vocal element, and a wicked acid line. It's just a question of saying, this is how simple I want the music to be. And it often doesn't need to be more complex. Another thing is I've been listening to a lot of electro recently. Oh my God, if you need any inspiration, go and listen to the Other People Place Lifestyles of the Laptop Cafe album. And then also listen to Der Cyclist, and I'll link to this below. It's one of Der Cyclist's old EPs, has a tune on it, Formen van der Velde, which is just the best expression of simple electro that I've heard. And I had a go at trying to recreate that tune with a friend of mine this month. And it's amazing how hard it is to get it exactly right. The elements are so specific and so carefully chosen that it does make me think again a little bit about the fact that I'm throwing modules at the problem to an extent here. One key element that I've been trying to bear in mind while I mess around with this is to try and pare things down a little bit. I don't have a very big case, so it kind of has to be simple. I don't really have a choice. But it's so critical to not overdo things and to turn the dials, let them live on the lower end of the spectrum rather than just turning them up fully, because you can tire people. Again, something I mentioned before is this idea of thinking about contrasts. When I'm playing, and it's not me who came up with this, but I remember reading someone said this, is just think about contrast. If you've been doing a lot of that one thing, pare it back for a while, then go big and then pare it back. Don't just stay full on. That, I think, hopefully will come with muscle memory and intuition as you play more, but I'm just trying to bear those tenets consciously in mind until I'm an unconscious competent, which I'm definitely not at the moment. So we shall see. Oh, one more thing. We've talked a lot this month, so I think it's very important to play as well. If you follow me on Facebook, you will have seen that I've bought a streaming box, clearly, because I've started streaming jams to Facebook. And I did a kind of 35-minute jam this month, just on this system, doing a whole set, basically, for 35 minutes straight and just kind of seeing what happens. So please have a look, and I hope you enjoy. That's it, and I love you. I'll see you at the show.